Oh, it's you guys again. Good. Thank you very much for attending this program. I guess you're having some long nights and reading and catching up because I did ask you to prepare yourself to come to these classes. So you should have done some reading, not relying upon me to simply fill you in with all the information you need, because where do you see the rest of the stuff that's coming after this? So we're at a very important chapter. It's sort of a turning point because it's through situational learning that we actually leverage ourselves to be able to do all the things we've been wanting to do, to actually make ourselves empowered, put ourselves in charge of the information that we use, put ourselves in a situation to be more knowledgeable and be seen to be more knowledgeable, because we're able to help our businesses, help our families, help our communities, because we're thinkers, because we're doers, because we have the tools behind us. And now if we understand situational learning, we know how to look at the situation and gather the information, condense it down, put it in databases, take out what we need, and we learn how to apply what we're learning. And the story on this one is the story that goes along with number 7. A major life responsibility is dealing with the wide variety of situations we encounter on a daily basis. Some situations are routine and need time, need a little attention, while at the other end of a continuum, they may be significantly life and or career threatening. What is important to understand is that every situation we encounter requires some amount of information gathering and analysis, followed by decision-making and action. And every situation is a potential learning opportunity. And I want to stress that point. Every situation, whether it's bad or good, from your way of thinking, is a potential learning opportunity. And many people have said that they've learned far more from the times that they were wrong or had to be corrected in something than they ever learned when they were right. And so therefore, we do know that even people who sometimes make errors admit to the fact that errors can be a chance for learning. The situational learning competency is a significant element in human capital development and in becoming what we have taken as our badge of honor to become learnership practitioners, which makes it a foundational anchor in the practice of learnership. Situational learning benefits from the support provided by systems thinking and pattern recognition, and it is the essential foundation for the practice of knowledge management, which follows. And so it's in a key place to really focus us on what we need to do. And so with that, going forward, it's our friends here, what we're doing for ourselves, hopefully getting the courage to anticipate we can move from the dark blue line to the green line a little bit above it, and maybe even starting to think that from 5 to 6 to 7, maybe there is a relationship that'll turn out and drive this wheel around and around and around, and give it lots of torque. The more torque in that wheel, the more power you're going to have. And it ends up with building this capacity right here, which in and of itself is called LISA, the Learnership Integrated Systems Architecture. Okay, so with that as our background, I'm going to start with this one. This chart, everything along this series here lives within this frame of people pushing and shoving and doing their own thing and having their own needs and interests, their own brain and their own type is always in play. But there are two things from two different sources that we've been able to feed together here that have meaning for us. One thing is the whole idea of how important the concept of dialogue is. Dialogue is thinking together using inquiry and advocacy at a common time and place. Thinking and advocacy. The purpose of dialogue is not to win a discussion or an argument. The question of dialogue is to exchange points of view and to build each other's knowledge so that you can find out where there are points of agreement and where there are points of disagreement, and then figure out if there's a way to sort of compromise and figure out how both parties can go forward because they found a mean somewhere between the extremes. And that's the learning part of it. It's about inquiry, and after you have the inquiry, then you advocate a way of moving forward. And one of the hardest things to do in today's world is to agree on with people on where you disagree and where you do agree, and then decide to take action on what you agree on. And this is all told in the story that's right here. This story is about listening to others to learn, then from that learning, establishing a group that has expectations and goals and objectives around that learning, and then continuing to respect one another as you are discovering how you're going to be working together, of voicing and talking to each other in a clear, fair, authentic, and unbiased way, getting the right kind of facilitator for the group that respects everybody's opportunity to participate, and then suspending any judgments or things that might be clearly destructive to the follow-on conversation for the sake of holding the group together. In other words, you have to go in looking for more information. You have to work fairly with everybody else. And if you find things that are not to your liking, unless they're going to be totally critical, you don't destroy that camaraderie simply just to be right if it doesn't matter for the long run. And that's dialogue. It's a learning opportunity. But then there's critical thinking, careful pursuit of essential information for reasoning and decision making. Critical thinking is different in that you can do that alone. It's a mindset that says, almost like a scientist, I will believe it when I see it. And I'm not going to be dissuaded by a lot of conversation or a lot of hoopla or adjectives or other things that might be playing in that arena. I'm going to want to know what really is truthful. The way that's done, some of the plays here, is that you require facts and valid reasoning. In other words, you have to be able to and willing to look at the source of information and decide, is that source a true, useful, good, unbiased source or not? If you start making mistakes right here and you take information in that is not even from legitimate sources, you are really undercutting your ability to do thinking that others can't tear apart. Because as soon as they see who you're basing your thinking with, they won't want to deal with you. So you got to require facts, but then you have to get clarification. And you got to see if they are strong reasons to support what you want to do. And you might have to go back and ask some more questions. The reason you allow yourself to do that is not to be a pain for everybody else. It's a matter of trying to show people that you care enough to get it right that you're willing to continue in conversation. And you inquire, and then you start to build the impression that collaboration and inclusion are being pursued. Now, this is a strange one, because are we doing real work here, or are we just building impressions in order to sell other people? So this is saying, no, you got to be authentic. You got to believe what you say and say what you believe. Then when you're trying to persuade other people, use the right questions and help get them into the way of thinking. Present yourself as a person willing to suspend preconditions, even though you might have things that get in the way. You're willing to suspend some of your preconditions. Talk, though. Be involved. Don't be afraid to talk. And try to be convincing, and then constrain inappropriate notions and encourage others. In other words, don't become a clown at the most important point, or the point where if you become a clown, everybody just says, well, you weren't kidding. You weren't serious with what you're doing. You're clowning this off. You're giving yourself away. But always encourage other people. So those are principles, not necessarily exactly in those orders, that indicates a person is a critical thinker trying to get the facts. And because we're in this zone already, we're looking for facts that come from systems thinking and pattern recognition. We're going to look outside of places that we might think to look, but maybe we're afraid to look because we might get information we didn't want to have. So in systems thinking, you might have to say, is there something close to this that we're not considering here, like there's people involved that live there, right? Like maybe the Flint water system. Oh, we can save $1 million a year if we just change the flow of the river. Oh, but what about the people? Do you think that they're going to be fine with this? Well, wait a minute, that's not our responsibility. We're in the production of cheap water. All water can be cleansed eventually. So our job is to get them to have water coming in. Let them figure out how to cleanse the water. Well, that's not responsible. You know, you can't be putting off problems on other people simply because it suits your short-term interest and you get your check for doing that. So these are two important points. Critical thinking and dialogue have a lot to do with whether a person's credible, they're knowledgeable, and they're learned, and they're fair, and they're good to work with. And sometimes you might be a little bit slow in coming to conclusion, but maybe people really want the true facts rather than just something that is satisfactory for the moment. So that's one set of things that are really important. Okay, the next slide is equally as important as this one, and there's actually a couple more similar to this, so we have to make a choice whether we look at them all or just select a couple two for this particular presentation. This slide is a very useful slide because we all come into conflict here. And I'm sure that everybody's had a meeting in which you sat down for a meeting to have a discussion, and the person running the meeting basically just about let it be run like chaos because everybody started talking about their own opinions on the topic, and not everybody was equally knowledgeable on the topic, not everybody was equally concerned about solving the problem, and therefore what came out was maybe an agreement that didn't have a massive majority of opinion agreeing. So the trick here is to facilitate groups that might have some difficulty getting to closure with one another, because getting to closure is as important, just about as important as getting to an answer that can be satisfactorily utilized. And the whole idea is if you have two sessions, like we sometimes have a series of meetings, is to separate the two sessions with two expectations. The first one is to let people know that this is a learn and reflect meeting. It's a time where we're going to absorb new information and perspectives, and therefore everybody in the room has an equal obligation to get involved and help us clarify what it is. What are they expecting? What do they want? And let's be clear on what we're trying to do. And everybody also stay open at this time and don't try to close anybody out. It's almost like brainstorming. Take suggestions seriously and think about how we might actually do those suggestions. So this is learning. Learning and reflecting where everybody has equal participation, and it's for the goal of getting to a mindset that allows us to accept one another as a contributor and therefore wanting to come out with a solution that everyone can accept. And to do that in balance with what the solution might be. Then you come back on the next appointed time and you are prepared to speak to the value of the particular interest that you think we should follow. And you recognize that anyone who gives a conciliatory comment or provides support is not a failure for not sticking with their original point of view, but they've come to a point of view where they can actually see something positively coming from the relationship and the meeting. And therefore, some people have decided, from their point of view, it's not willing to fight to win. Their point of view is they want to be on a winning team to get something done. So then what you're doing is you're coming to closure. First, you open up for dialogue, and then you let the group and you help the facilitator bring it to consensus where there's no major complainers because they were left out or they weren't considered because everybody had a chance to be heard and considered. It's a matter of being fair to people so that you will not have people say, well, they never liked me anyway, this group never listens to me, she always wants to work for him and she doesn't want to work for me, and blah, 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 blah. That's not what you want to do. You just want to solve the problem and keep on going. And sometimes that's the best you can do. Politicians should know and learn about some of this stuff. Sometimes you do the best you can do, given the people and the situation. But we seem to think that if we go back and double down, we can win this later on again. And maybe we can later, but maybe we can't at all, wasting time. So that's a very important learning there. Moving on, this guy right here is the most significant one in this set. Because this one, again, playing within our boundaries, that everything's going on in every knowledge arena for every different people. We can say some things for sure about how knowledge, how learning takes place. This is social systems decision making. It's about situational learning. Situational learning is different than just learning in that you have to take into account the factors, the influencing factors that are playing in the arena, even though you might like to discard them. And those influencing factors could be resources, could be money, could be a lot of things. But you simply say, we're going to bound this problem. There are things that are not included. The things that are included are the most important. But if we make a decision without including everything and we find out later we were wrong, we're going to have to bring something else in and rethink our solution. So that's situational learning. And the way the learning works, it works on two levels. It works on we as individuals or as groups assess the situation that is seen to be a problem or an issue. We assess it, we have choices as to what to do, and we decide which choice to take, and then we execute that particular solution, and then we monitor it through another assessment period to see if we fix the problem. That's almost an extroverted or looking outward activity. It's a cycle of learning. I'm always assessing, deciding, executing, assessing, deciding, and executing. But I'm doing so in an environment that things are always changing, so I can't even be sure the circumstances are all the same every time I do it. I don't necessarily have the same time to do it in, and sometimes we might be talking about the past, and we haven't agreed that we're talking about the past. We think we're still talking about the present. So some people are saying, that's not the way we do things around here. Well, you're still talking about the past. We're talking about how it's going to be. Let's talk about the future. And then lastly, complexity. Oh, we used to do it that way, and it was very easy. It wasn't very complex, and we didn't have to change. Guess what? It's not very easy anymore. We have to change, and it's going to be done in the future. The game has changed. The situation has changed. So we assess, we decide, we execute. Assess, decide, we execute. Everybody has to do this. This is a life through of choices, and you got to do it. That's different than what goes on inside you. Because you could still be playing this outside game. The inside game is, I'm sensing that in this group where I used to have a lot of friends, I'm losing my friends for something that's going on here that I may or may not be in charge of. But right now, without making the big fuss about it, I'm going to have to adapt to the realities of my situation because they're not the same as they used to be. I used to be able to count on my friends to vote my own way. I thought I was going to be the homecoming queen, and they're looking at somebody else. They're not good to me anymore. I don't really like them anymore. The way you deal with adaptation is you renew. You renew yourself to fit within the new model. You're not going to be able to force the others to change simply because you're uncomfortable with what you're sensing. Unless truly what you're sensing is so unfair, such illegality, that it's clear that you can't maintain that position. Mostly life is about adjusting to how people treat us, how we see it, how do we adapt to it, how we renew ourselves, how we come back again. So there's two levels of learning. There's the internal and the external learning always going on in our lives. To know that, to actually contemplate in your life when you're having experiences, that is, I am really unhappy, but I'm glad she did that or said that, because had she not done that, I would have never had a clue that he was thinking that way about me and the mistakes I would have made had I not known that. In other words, the reality was different than my reality. And I'd rather know the reality that's real because I can deal with that. I can't deal with the hidden things that don't come out and don't get onto the surface where you can deal with them. So it's our responsibility always to go through this and say, I'm just on a learning cycle now. We allow ourselves to say, we're not in a resolution point, we're on a learning cycle, just trying to figure it out. As long as we can keep ourselves in a place like that, we don't feel guilty unless we never get out of that place. And so if you follow this out then, look at this though. If you have this going on within this framework, and you got specific tools that you know are things like, let's see where number one is here. Number one is, well, how do you deal with a circumstance like this? Well, a systematic way is to gather the correct information and analyze the information. From that, build a strategy to deal with the issue that you're seeing, implement your strategy, see what results from the action you have taken, and then take an adaptive action. This is a reasoned approach to dealing with a situation that is either really good for you or really bad, because you could think it's good, and when you look at it, it's still not really good. But you have to think it through. Who's getting something out of this? Is it only me, or is there somebody else getting something out that I don't want them to get? That's the one thing. The second thing is that there are psychological pieces at play in this. One has to do with whether you're a sensor or you're an intuitor, you're a thinker or a feeler, and whether you are a person who's reactive or directive, because it has to do with something about yourself too. If you are a sensor and you have a tendency to be a thinker, an ST person is going to be directive in how you respond to things. If you're an intuitor and you're a feeler, you're going to react to it, but you're not going to be directive. And so there's a play that has to do with you as a person emotionally that has to play out consistent with still doing a reasoned approach to getting information and making decisions. And those two things do not disrupt going around the cycle. But as you're going around the cycle, in time, the amount of time this takes may change, this may change, this may change, other factors may come into play. So what you have is a tumbling, chaotic kind of situation that the only worse thing than living in it is not doing it at all and saying, I have no idea what's going on. Because those who don't know what's going on have already lost in the game of being aware and being important in decision making. So why this is so important, if you knew this cold, so many other things would be easier, because you would know you have to be a systems thinker, because there's too many things out of range unless you're willing to do this. They're just out of range. You know that you have to look at more people and what they're really trying to do, because there are people playing with you somewhere in this thing. So this forces you to say, okay, I want to know you. We've been working together for a year, but I don't think I know you, because you did that, you said this and so forth, and I was thinking you were different than that. So what I'm saying is, we are about reality. The important thing on the American Learnership Forum is that reality rules. Reality rules, even though mythology might be very powerful. It's one of the 25 principles that we haven't talked about, but we never let mythology take the place of rational thinking, which causes people problems because a lot of people are driven by emotions. So there's another issue in life: who's emotionally driven and who's not. But anyway, that was the second piece of critical importance, but more important than anything we saw before. More important than anything we saw before, as is this last piece. This piece is so important that these two go together. So if I was going to only hold on to two pieces, I would have held on to the one we just did plus this one here. Because this one tells us something about the culture in which we live and how it becomes a culture in which we live. It has to do with social system, communications, and culture. It has to do with understanding what's going on all the time between us. And this first piece is pretty informative, and it says that everybody lives in a system, and that social system has a culture of some sort. It probably has multiple cultures to be true. And those cultures can be defined as being at level 1, level 2, or level 3, depending upon how these actions are at play. For example, if we take it from a logical beginning, people who have a certain worldview, let's say Iraq, when they were a country, they had a worldview. They had a purpose. They had an ontology, meaning a being, a reason for being. They existed, and they had a life force or energy to stay like they were. Those people who were under Saddam Hussein at that time, they had the power to direct how other people would act. So they lay down the law as far as ethics, values, beliefs, and so forth.
So sorry.
So and the critical thing is, down deep inside, it's always the worldview of people and what has meaning in their life that drives them to create the ethics, values, beliefs, principles, and meaning and ideas that others have to follow. Hopefully they would too. But it's a system that this drives this, and this drives behavior. The relationships, the artifacts, the communication, the priorities. So if you get Christians, and I shouldn't always use it, but Christians, Muslims, and Jews together like they have in Jerusalem, they have a real tough time living on the same land there, sharing that land, which they all believe is the heart of their religious purpose. And so it's hard to reconcile when there's significantly different worldviews or sense of being. Whose values, whose ethics, and whose principle is going to create who goes where and when. So you're always at a fight over who determines how to think, what to think, and how to behave. It's a play going on here. Now, that play causes people who are in this culture to react in a certain way going up to the rest of the world, which I'm going to go to in a minute. It's sort of the rest of the world up here. So that's in play. Coming down from this social media, this world up here, is awareness, which leads to learning. The degree to which we are become aware of the fact that laws have changed and homosexuality is now an acceptable life form, and it's in law and it's in the rules to the degree that we as a culture, as a bunch of cultures, learn that that's the way it's going to be because our government of laws tells us that. That tells us, that gives us the knowledge to think about how to live our lives vis-a-vis that change in the law, because it's going to cause some people to know things differently. Because unless you know things the same way that the people who make the laws know it, you're always going to be out of step. So it's easier to fight, or switch, or just say, I don't care about it anymore. So what you're aware of happening sets up what you think should be allowed to happen, and then that drives down to the fundamental understanding. So just on knowing my own life and thinking about that, I might be really uncomfortable on a number of levels there, and it might be hard to accept, understanding that I have to accept it, and I might say I'm not going to accept it. And North Carolina has said that they are not going to accept it. And Mississippi has said they're not going to accept it. They are going to insert other laws that try to undo what the Constitution, not the Constitution, but what the federal government has said is the law. But what only point I'm making is the social system overwhelming culture is trying to influence the outer world. At the same time, its data is coming in from the outer world and trying to tell the culture what it is. So when you talk about Republicans and Democrats at their extremes, there really is a culture war going on, because at their worldview, fundamental view, they do not accept the story down here. And they may say, we may play games with it, and you might play games with it up here, but we ain't playing games with it. When you get down here and start messing with us, you're going to find it's really, really hard to stick by your guns. So we live in a society which is always ready to go to war over these kinds of things. And sometimes those things are really out of line. Why are you even worrying about those things? On the other hand is because those things are more important than other things. So what I'm saying is culture is determined by this interplay between this and the communication system. But the communication system looks like this. We have personal, organizational, social, and community. Now, there's social system communication going on all the time. And in that system, there's this bar. This bar says there's something like chaos going on, because the daily data stream, 24/7, our internet, is putting out facts and diversions. So I said, well, wait a minute. I don't want to deal with an internet that has diversions. I want an internet that has facts. See, this complicates the darn thing, because we play in a game where some people think that these facts are diversions, and some people think their diversions are their facts. And there's no arbitrator as to absolute truth and absolute lies. So what happens is, information is flowing by. You look at it every few hours, the damn thing goes this way, then it goes that way. Then it goes here, then she comes in, and then he goes in. And then you sit back and say they can't agree on anything. And they can't agree on anything. Then, I'm a poor guy who says, but I'm doing research. I need useful information, and I'm going to this place. How the hell am I going to decide what's useful and not useful? I've got to go find out, is it a credible source or not? And I have to make a choice. Now, here's the mistake. I'm writing a book. The things I choose to put in, somebody else might say, "That's you got so and so in there. He's never been a critical source in sociology. He doesn't know anything. He's a nutcase." Sorry, I didn't know that. Because why? Because what I'm trying to get out of this chaos is useful information that is requisite knowledge, that I can then take it down the stream and I can show that relationship. For my head, for my brain, I want to know that what I'm learning comes down here, I make meaning out of it, and I follow it down, I want to know that when I'm down here, it falls on layers of truthfulness and authentic knowledge. I don't want to hear about anything else, because I've gone from chaos to choice to meaning. But then I publish a book. I take Rudy Garrity's worldview, which may or may not be well articulated based upon my understanding here. Then I put my sense of values and beliefs, and I select the ones nobody else does. And then I lay out the behaviors, and then I come up this side, and I say, I'm going to tell you what the content is, I'm going to tell you what the context is. I build the context. Other people would not probably put ecology and geography and things like that in the context factors. All I know is that professionals do. Professional thinkers at the international level look at things more deeply than most of us do. So I lean in that direction to give context and content. And then the question is, well, how do I even express myself? I sit in there and I write proposals, and I write to give speeches. I create the context. I created this. Everything that I send out now says that that's the truth. I'm telling my story over and over and over again. And it's going to fit my story one way or another. And even if I'm wrong, until somebody tells me and proves I'm wrong, I'm right. So I'm creating a mental model, and then I create the facts, or somebody else says, that damn guy in New Jersey, now in Virginia, what the hell does he think? He's just in a diversion to those of us in Massachusetts who are really knowledgeable on this subject. So my point is, we each create outgoing filters about how we'll say things, and we use incoming filters as to what we'll accept. And we are constantly cycling around trying to figure out how to think, what to think, what to take, what to use, when to use it. Is it from the past? Is it from the present? Is it important to the future? And are we always clarifying which band that we're talking about? I call that complex opacity. That means that I want my brain to be like a university's brain. I want to have my finger on a little bit of everything, just to know enough about things I'm not really knowledgeable, so I can say something with confidence. Even in mathematics, which I have a terrible at, I'd like to be able to say that I know that 2 plus 2 is 4. It is not 5, damn it. So I'm going to stick to 4. I'm not going to go to 5, but I'm not going to go any higher than that and claim it's true. So what's the responsibility for us? As situational learners, we have to throw ourselves on the court of time and say, I'm a human being. I am doing the best I can. I am learning as hard and as fast as I can. And I am playing in the game of life as hard as I can. And that's my defense. If I didn't play fast enough, I didn't play hard enough, if I was wrong, then I throw myself on the court for mercy. But if you don't even want to play in the game of life, just tune it out. Go surfing for the rest of your life. You don't have to. You can probably survive. So this is an important distinction, because I am saying that this is mindfulness. You are learning tools and techniques and frameworks to frame filters so that you're likely to get things that really matter and not things that don't matter. You can't tell me that mindfulness, and I saw this to be demonstrated, is that you shut your eyes and you walk around the room paying attention to how your toes are feeling in your shoes. And as long as you can feel your toes and feel your heels and you can feel your shoulders, now you're getting mindful. To me, that's like mindless. Because the mind is a place, it's a database. It's a place for storing things. It's not a place that you try to run away from, unless the only thing you want to do temporarily is to reduce your stress. But see, I had lots of books on mindfulness that people with lots of reputation are reading. And I'm saying, what the hell? But that's life. As we can see here, there's lots of opportunities for improvement. You pick the ones that are right for you, and you go with that one. And at this slide, we once again ask you the question, which is right for you? In your personal life and in your career, which one applies to you the most at this time?